Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. I want to talk about Goddess Vesta, who is currently transiting the sign of Virgo. So let's just start. A couple of things. The first thing that you could consider is where is Virgo in your birth chart? Because we want to actually look at when Vesta first ingressed into Virgo. Although I've spoken a little bit about this previously, but I'm speaking about it differently today because of her final square to the nodes. We'll get to that in a minute. So where is Virgo in your birth chart? This is what you're going to track relative to Vesta's movement. Another thing to perhaps consider is where is Vesta in your natal birth chart, because her natal position, and I said this in my previous video, when you're looking at any transiting body, whether it's an asteroid or a planet, you are always looking at you're starting to look from the very beginning of, well, where did this planet start from in my birth chart? So, for example, if you have Saturn in the fourth house natally, just as an example, and from birth, naturally, a second later, after, because the birth chart is just a frozen snapshot, it's like taking a picture of the sky, right? Everything is always continuously moving. All right. So Saturn is obviously going to move around your whole chart. It's going to take 29 years to move around your whole chart, which is the Saturn return, the first Saturn return, etc., etc. But as Saturn is moving through each part of your chart, it's going to be carrying with it the essence of the fourth house, for instance. The fourth house is always going to be at the root of what manifests or transpires as it transits around your chart. And we can use that same principle for the asteroid goddesses as well, in this case Vesta. So where is Virgo in your chart? Number one. Number two, the transit of Virgo in Vesta began on the 23rd of October 2020. And because Vesta went retrograde on the 19th of January this year, that has meant that her journey in Virgo has been a lot longer than it otherwise would be. In the same way, when a planet, goes retrograde in a particular sign, it spends a longer period of time in that planet, right? So what's been happening since late October up to the point where we are now, which is around about the 10th of May, just around the time of the new moon, virtually, just before the new moon, Vesta has reached around about 9 degrees. And so in about a week's time, she's going to form her last square to the nodes. So her journey in Virgo, since late October last year until now, through her retrograde periods as well, she's basically had 2 squares to the nodes already. The first square was in February. Let me see. Sorry, the first square was in December, 25th of December 2020. And at that time, she was also transiting Neptune in Pisces. Then she had her next square at around about the 19th of January. That's when she went retro. Let me just start that again so there's no confusion. She entered Virgo I'll bring up the chart and we can kind of look at this visually as well. So she entered Virgo on the 23rd of October. Her first square was on the 25th of December, where she was opposite Neptune as well. She went stationary retrograde on the 19th of January 2021, and she was squaring the nodes on the 25th of February 2021. Then she went stationary direct on the 20th of April. And now coming towards the 23rd of May, which is in 13 days' time, she's going to have her final square with the nodes. And when we go into the month of June, even though she's moved ahead, she's moved on from the degree where she was exactly square the nodes, she's still going to be within range of squaring the nodes, but she's moving away. She's separating from that relationship as she continues to move forward in her journey. She's picking up momentum because she's finished her squares and she's moving on, getting ready to basically eventually move into the sign of Libra. But we still have her in Virgo for, quite a few more weeks, and we're still yet to experience the last square that she is going to bring up. And that's going to be the closing point of what the cycle of Vesta squaring the nodes has meant for us personally in our life, and also on a collective level as well. Because when a planet and another body square each other, it's usually 3 squares that take place, okay? And you can consider that as the first square being the planting of the seed, if you like. It's the beginning of that journey. So there's not a lot of clarity of what's going on at the beginning, but there's certainly some unconscious kind of sense of things starting to be considered, contemplated on, or even more so actually thinking about what it is you really want to act on, okay, when it comes to Vesta, for instance. And the second square, which, as I said, that was in February this year, that would have been a really pivotal sort of point in her journey, squaring the nodes, that is, about where we are at the halfway point of this journey. So what is it what seeds did we plant? What is it that's sort of now showing up for us, or what are we showing up to as well, that we can see has helped us develop and grow? And by the way, let's just back up. Vesta is all about the inner soul sacred work that we do. That's fundamentally what she's about. She's a very, very mysterious and complex goddess, right? She has her mythology is so rich. The history in the mythology is so rich and very deep and very complex. And before I sidetrack, so that we can be clear, the last square we are about to step into is the final closure of that journey, as I was just saying before. So it's the seeing now where we have arrived with that journey of Vesta squaring the nodes, and I'll unpack that one bit at a time. But just a reminder of Vesta, who is the sacred hearth goddess, who holds a sacred flame. And in the mythology, she's one of the daughters of Saturn, or one of the children of Saturn. And so when Saturn swallowed all his children, she was the last one to be ingested and to also come back out, because when Saturn swallowed his children, they were all eventually released. And so she was the first one to go in, and the last one to come out. And that's a very important metaphor for the symbolism of Vesta. That's why she corresponds to the soul work that we do, that inner private work. It's our own private soul journey work that we do, and it's to the exclusion of everything else. She represents the principle of focus, devotion, and commitment to our sacred journey, our sacred life, our soul life, our inner life, the inner work that we do. And because she's the principle of focus and commitment and devotion, her energy is super intense on that level, because when she chooses to, that is, when you choose to work with your Vesta energy, by the way, the word investment comes out of Vesta. So whatever we choose to invest in from that level of Vesta's energy, it's so intensely focused, and you can't help it but just really focus and hone into one specific sort of direction or area of your life, to the exclusion of everything else. That's just the nature of her, of Vesta, that is. So in Virgo, it's been so much about working through our own journey in a much more committed and disciplined manner. Now, she's a very disciplined goddess to begin with. It even is said that in terms of rulership, Vesta would be one of the main goddesses that corresponds to the archetype of Virgo. In other words, she rules Virgo. So there's a strong alliance and connection with the archetype of Virgo and Vesta. There's very similar core principles about the signature, the fabric of those archetypes. And so here we have her in her own sign, as it were, for the last 6 months or whatever it's been. And in Virgo, it's really looking at our life on a very practical day-to-day level. It's looking at the very simple things of sleep, waking up, what we eat, nutrition, washing dishes, setting up your space, whether it's a private space or your business space if you're working from home, which I know, so many people are working from home these days, especially since that whole thing started in 2020, wasn't it? Yeah, March 2020 is when it sort of kicked off in the world. And so many people's lives have, changed in pretty dramatic ways. Some people, of course, have been able to, to implement the changes fairly fluidly, and others have, had more struggles, because it depends, what sort of line of work you had and if you were working for somebody else and so forth. But regardless of the employment work situation, this is pointing to the sacred work that we do in our life on a daily, practical, basic sort of level. It's because it's Virgo and the opposite is Pisces, the polarity, the axis is Virgo Pisces. It's a bit like understanding that our daily sort of practices and rituals can all contribute to our spiritual awakening, to the alignment of the soul and the personality, the integration of that, having respect and appreciation for the very simple, practical daily things in life, as opposed to identifying with them as being a chore and, a burden or an obstacle, which sometimes they can be. I totally agree. But this is the teaching of, Vesta in Virgo. She's showing us the way to, first of all, what sort of dedication or devotion can we or do we want to implement towards our mental and physical and mental, physical, spiritual health, emotional health. She's enabling us to take a deeper dive inside ourselves to see what are the areas that we could actually really work on and improve that require that extra sense of real focus and dedication that normally could be very challenging for people to integrate, to bring into their life, because not everyone has, the ability to be really disciplined. We all have challenges around being really disciplined and unless we've got a lot of Virgo in our chart. And even then, we can flip onto the opposite, which is Pisces. And because we see all the imperfections, we can become so overwhelmed by the amount of things that we need to do to kind of purify things or refine them or fix them or correct them. And it's so overwhelming that what we'll end up doing is going into the Pisces side, the polarity, the opposite side, and just kind of get lost in a whirlwind of chaos. This is one of the primary challenges between Virgo and Pisces, that shadow, because every sign has its shadow, which is its opposite sign. So Vesta is teaching us to to have an appreciation and a dedication towards the everyday practical components of life that can help us improve, purely and simply. Squaring the nodes has been an interesting journey because the transiting nodes, which are in Gemini and Sagittarius, have been testing us in pretty extreme ways in terms of the nature of reality since last year, right? Because just because of how much this reality seems to have changed so drastically, so intensely, in the biggest ways that perhaps most of us have witnessed in our lifetime, right? Due to the adjustments and changes that we've had to try and implement as best we can. And then, of course, the whole level of Sagittarius, which is about information and truth. And because the North Node is in Gemini, there is a real sort of overload, if you like, of information circulating in the airwaves. And there's been the square to Neptune as well, which has had a very strong impact in confusion about what is actually true and what isn't. So this has been playing into it as well. And then there's the South Node Sagittarius, which does hold a level and layer of truth, but it can also be that we are holding on to truths that we have outgrown, perhaps. And I guess what that really means is that because we are constantly growing and evolving and developing, a truth that we perhaps had held on to because of our cultural upbringing or our cosmological orientation to life, or the awareness of the lineage we've been born into, whatever it may be, it may very well be now that there's something about that we need to actually grow, sort of not grow out of, but it would be more about investigating and inquiring and keeping more of an open mind and a curiosity towards new ideas, new knowledge coming through, which is the North Node in Gemini. And so Vesta has been a big part of this because she's been squaring the nodes. So the Vestal work that we have been doing on ourselves, which connects to health, mind-body connection or disconnection, well-being, all those sorts of things, much bigger things actually. And then just the very, very simple things of our daily little rituals and way of life, lifestyle choices and things like that. Squaring the nodes has taken us through a journey of having to examine the South Node in Sagittarius, perhaps beliefs or views we've had about certain things. So we could hold a belief about something in our life which has, such a power over the lifestyle choices we make. And whilst that may have been appropriate or useful at a particular time, when we step into the transiting nodes, being in South Node in Sag and North Node in Gemini, we are learning new information. We just have to. The North Node is in Gemini. We're heading towards the North Node in Gemini, which means an integration of new ideas, new knowledge, new thought processes, new learning, all of that, in order for what? For us to actually continue to grow and evolve. We don't grow and evolve if we stay with the same thing all the time, whatever it is. If we decide to stay perhaps with, a set of values and beliefs, which a lot of us do, the healthiest expression of that would be that that is continuously evolving as well, just like you are, just like I am, just like we all are. We're not static, we're not frozen in time, we're always growing and evolving. And so if we are always growing and evolving, then so are our beliefs and ideas and knowledge systems and things like that. So the North Node in Gemini is stimulating so much of that, and it's stimulating a lot of chaos and confusion too, because, Gemini, as I've said before, it can get caught up with um, the splitting of things off, splitting things up and needing to make something right in order for that to be needing to make something wrong in order for that to be right, etc. So it's the splitting of things. So, and as I previously said in the Venus in Gemini video that I uploaded just a couple of days ago, the healthiest embracement of Gemini is to keep an open and curious mind, as best as you can, an open and curious mind. You come across a piece of information, an article, whatever, somebody says something to you. Curiosity around that is the healthiest thing you can have, because that will enable you to explore that information that's come to you and how valuable and useful it is for you at the moment relative to your own journey. And bringing it back to Vesta, it could be, because Vesta corresponds to mind body health as well, and the focus, the commitment that we would like to integrate towards that. The square to the nose has been challenging us to be able to move away from a set of beliefs that we've had, that could be about a diet, about certain lifestyle choices, about things we eat, and whatever. We may have come across a diet that says you have to eat meat 4 times a day when you're training at the gym and you want to bulk up your muscle. And that's not necessarily a truth. That's a person's opinion from a nutritional baseline that corresponds to bodybuilding, for instance. But we know now, particularly with the vegan movement, there's so much more knowledge and insight and awareness that has come through with the benefits of raw food and not eating meat. And there's been a lot of scientific research and evidence that has been produced showing us actually the danger of eating a lot of meat, and not only to our own body, but also to what the killing of the animals, this incessant killing of animals, what it's actually doing to the earth, the impact that is having on those larger eco state sort of levels, right? And just it's devastating moving forward into the future if we don't learn to make different lifestyle choices and learn how to let go of these older kind of beliefs or habits or ways of being and eating and so forth, right? That's just one example. And because Virgo is about health, nutrition, and things like that, and Vesta is in Virgo, so she's getting us to focus, whether that's on health or work situations or whatever. The focus primarily is about improving on ourselves and how can we improve. And the one of the things to watch with this would be that Virgo has that side to it where the inner critic can come in and be so judgmental, so judgmental on our own self or others for that matter. And that it's one thing to have a critical mind, like to be a critical thinker is a very powerful skill. Actually, it's one of the most powerful skills relative to the left brain, to be a critical thinker. It takes real intelligence to do that, actually. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the critical voice that is extremely negative and draining and is not serving for any productivity. It's not giving you productive critical feedback. It's just making you feel bad about yourself, and so you fall deeper and deeper and deeper into the slumber of, well, what's the point? It's all just freaking too hard. It's like everything is just such a mess on that level, or in that area, or in that area. It would just take so much time and energy to actually fix all of that or clean all of that up. And that can be the downside to Virgo, and that makes us sort of procrastinate even more, or become complacent, or in just total denial, right? And so we fall into the Pisces sort of, it's like everything is kind of disjointed and sort of chaotic, and so overwhelming, and thus that can bring up a lot of anxiety as well. I was just working with a client today, and it was predominantly a therapeutic counseling session, with a little bit of astrology towards the end. And I didn't know exactly what this client was going to bring today, but as the conversation was going, which I was facilitating the process of that space to give her the platform, the space to feel heard and validated, for one, and understood. That's one of the primary purposes of a therapist, right? It's not about giving the person the answers and telling them what to do. That's actually taking a person's power away. It's just really about facilitating a therapeutic process that unfolds and opens up and leads into all sorts of directions, depending on how open and curious the client themselves can be. But there are a number of things that came up, and one of the things that I could intuitively feel very strongly just by looking at her and listening to her was that her solar plexus chakra was just completely bombarded and just totally decentered. So the solar plexus chakra is one of the, in terms of the 7 traditional chakras, is the one that sits just here under the chest area, right? Corresponding to Virgo, and Vesta is in Virgo. And what does Virgo, or the solar plexus chakra, correspond to? Well, first of all, Virgo corresponds to the intestines in our body that actually discriminate the nutrients that need to remain in your body from what you drink and eat, and discard the toxic waste and the junk that your body doesn't need. That's why Virgo is the archetype that corresponds to discrimination. That's what it literally does in the body. So the solar plexus chakra, which corresponds to this area of the body, is a chakra. It corresponds to many things, but one thing it corresponds to is the fears and anxieties and insecurities that we can have about the material plane, and a sense of control around that in our lives, right? And so I looked at my client and I suggested that I could intuitively feel that the solar plexus chakra was just bombarded with so much debris, so many layers of things that were wrapped up in anxiety and fear. And I proceeded to explain to my client that I gave her some techniques around breath work, and the focus being the solar plexus chakra. And then I followed through with visualizing the color of the sun's rays, for instance, that beautiful golden sun when it's not obscured by anything, and connecting that to the solar plexus chakra, which is yellow in color, and doing some breath work around that to free up that space, to, in other words, to release the anxieties that are there. There was more to it, but I'm just giving you the summary version. And just as I was explaining this to her, she was in a room, and everything in the room was neutral in color except for one thing that was yellow that was right behind her. And my eye from my peripheral vision caught it, but I didn't say anything about it. And then just as I finished explaining the method and the technique around breath work and the focus on the solar plexus chakra and what was happening with that, her response was, she said, "I can't believe this." She said, "This is just freaking me out." She said, "I went and bought this yellow clock, just recently. It's just here." And so there she reaches to that yellow object that I could see. I couldn't see that it was a clock because it was laying face down. And so she brings the clock around and she shows me it's a clock, right? That's bright yellow. That's a synchronicity, right? This is her higher self, okay, drawing her to objects in the material plane that are reflecting some things that are really out of balance inside her. And it's interesting that it was a clock because it's suggesting time, as in, it's time to do something about this. And in addition to that, she had also purchased some other material objects in a yellow color, which she's never ever done in her life before. So, anyway, that's an example of, recognizing that the synchronicities when you're working with somebody, and so on and so forth. And this all does come back to Vesta, because a lot of this session was based around eliminating anxiety. What are the practices that would be best useful for this person around that? And it was discussing daily things about, your daily routine, right? So when you get up, what is it that you normally first do? What do you go to first? How do you notice where your mind is going? Because the mind is just going to be so extremely busy and active from the time you wake up. It all starts kind of, circulating to everything about your life, right? So how much attention are we paying to that? Just that process. So breath work can be very powerful for anxiety and for racy sort of intellect and mind and things like that, obviously, right? And so being aware with this Vesta in Virgo about just our overall daily way of living, and then focusing on just one thing, at a time, and sort of taking it day by day as well. Because when we don't do that, especially if we've got a lot of anxiety, the issue becomes that everything is just so big. The issues are just so complex. The problems are just too big, and I'm just totally overwhelmed by that. I cannot go there. So I'll do the opposite and I'll just get lost, Pisces, and I just won't bother to do anything. And so you just spiral into this pattern that goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And so the Vesta in Virgo is a reminder of the spirit, the sacred, spiritual, divine, intelligent consciousness is in the material world every day, in every little thing that you do. Every little thing you do can be approached from a sacred perspective. That's what Vesta is reminding us and giving us the lens to improve in our life, on ourself, on any level that we recognize needs further improvement and work. And the square to the nodes is about the integration and implementation of opening our mind to learning new ways and new things, as opposed to keeping the South Node in Sag, older belief systems, paradigms, ways that we've viewed things and held that as being 100% truth, and that's the way it should always be. Nothing remains the same. Everything moves on, and nothing is permanent, and we are always evolving. So that would therefore mean that we are always learning something new. If we're not learning, then we're not evolving. And so this is what the Vesta journey has meant since October last year. And before I go, I'll just bring up the chart. Let me just take a breath. Okay. So just grab some tools. There's Vesta. There's the nodes. Sorry, I probably should remove all that stuff in the center just to make it so much clearer to see, right? Those lines and squiggles and whatnots in the center, for those of you that don't know, are just shorthand writing, if you like, for the relationship between one planet to the other, or one body to the other. But it get like, I'm used to that because I've been looking at these patterns for a very long time, so it doesn't obscure what I see. But for beginners, this is like, it's just what the hell is that, right? So don't worry about what's in the center. Just look at the North Node in Gemini, South Node in Sag, 10 degrees, almost 11. Vesta is 8 degrees. So we need to just get rid of that, and I'm going to animate the chart. Just take it forward. So, I mean, it's within, or even a few days before this, really. But to get it to like real close exactness, we're looking at about the 23rd of May. Okay, it's just a few minutes apart. That is Vesta to the nodes. So this is the third and final square of her journey, being in Virgo, having been opposite Neptune, that could have been an incredible opening for spiritual insights, and or an absolute wake-up call relative to being disillusioned about things in your life that correspond to Virgo, which is just lifestyle choices, how you're living your life on all levels. You could have just to give another simple example, you might have a real sweet tooth. If you've got Venus in your first house natally, you'll have a sweet tooth, whether that's for chocolate or ice cream or cakes or pastries or whatever. You'll have a sweet tooth, and just a fondness of food altogether, really. And that's not an easy thing to just stop like that. And this is again the point with Vesta in Virgo. It's about remembering that we're not going to get anything perfect in one day. And that's even if we ever reach perfection with anything at any point in time. Virgo is always reminding us of how we can continuously improve. It's never going to, we don't get to a level and say, right, I'm absolute perfection. I'm perfect. And so the point is to be more forgiving and more accepting towards yourself when you do have a bad day or a difficult day, or you messed up today with a particular plan or schedule that you had started to work towards or implemented, or that could be diet, whatever it is. I mean, I've gone through a bit of that myself lately, with Vesta's been in my 8th house, transiting while she's still in there, while she's in Virgo. And that's a very deep, complex house, the Scorpio house. And my Vesta in my chart is in my 12th house. So again, she's in a very deep water house as well, natally. And so the journey for me has been, well, God, it's been so complex. I couldn't really articulate it and frame it in just a few words. And it's also a very private and personal journey that I don't really wish to disclose publicly. But I just want to say that it's been a very intense, deep process of looking at the things that I want to work on very deeply inside myself. I suppose it's the most simplest way I can put it. And also, learning a lot of new learning myself as well. Um, the nodes coming into it has got very much to do with my teaching classes as well. If you could see my chart, you'd understand, but I don't like to show my chart, so I don't, sorry. Okay, so anyway, I'll leave it there, I think. Oh, yeah, and just finally, I was also going to say that if we move forward to around about here, there's a lunar eclipse. It's the first lunar eclipse of the year, okay? You can see the nodes. Let me just get... How do I erase? Yay. That was easy. Got to explore with these tools a bit more to see what they're all about. So there's the nodes. Oops. Right. There's the moon. Oh, I like this one better because it draws straight lines. Yes. Okay. Moon, sun, opposition. What's that? That's a full moon. The nodes are there, so it's a lunar eclipse. Lunar eclipse refers to a full moon, okay? Solar eclipse refers to a new moon. Now look at Vesta. She's 11.5 degrees of Virgo, so, she's still square the nodes. She's moving away though, like I said, so she's not going to do this square again. She's finally just, moving forward in the rest of her journey in Virgo. She's been in Virgo for quite some time because she went retrograde. So, I guess we could say, because the lunar and solar eclipses are so powerful, because there's this one and then there is the solar eclipse coming up on the 10th of June as well. And Vesta will still be pretty close to the nodes and to that solar eclipse as well. So it's kind of like the end of her journey is getting eclipsed by a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse, which will just bring a lot more light and focus and emphasis and energy onto what this journey of Vesta in Virgo has meant for you. That's the way I would look at it. So hopefully that was helpful. I know there's a lot of you that love the goddesses, just as I do. And yeah, I'll see you guys very soon with Jupiter in Pisces. Much love. Thanks for watching. Bye.